I'm Jay Loschky, Valparaiso University, Indiana Epsilon. I was initiated in fall 2002. I'm from Indianapolis, Indiana. I grew up on the south side, kind of a working neighborhood, working side of town. Had a kind of classic Midwestern upbringing. In middle school, in English class, we had an admissions counselor come in from Franklin College, and she gave us a big fat book with all the college rankings. And you could look through there and you could see what kind of SAT score you needed and what kind of activities you had and what the dorms were like and all that stuff. And for some reason, I've always been really high on input, like bringing in information whether or not you ever need it or not. So I kind of memorized all those things and ranked all these schools I wanted to go to when I was in 8th grade. Valpo was one that was, close to home but not too far. It was a great school. And I think when Bryce Drew hit that shot in 1998, and I was, I think, a sophomore or freshman in high school, that really kind of sealed the deal for me. That's where I wanted to go. I wanted to go somewhere that had values, that wasn't too far from home, that had great basketball, and really was like a campus where you could get to know a lot of people, right? Like you could get to know your professors and you could get to know all the students. Not kind of a suitcase college, but like someplace where you really could go and be present. I chose Phi-Sci really for the people, and my selection process was not extensive. I met a couple guys. I said, these are my kind of guys. I could tell they were good people who really cared about each other, and they cared about academics, and they cared about doing good things in the world. And I knew immediately those were the kind of people I wanted to be around. And I met some people there who were very successful, campus presidents even, and I knew these were guys who were going somewhere, and that's why I want to be associated with. I was able to attend the leadership meeting at Cabo San Lucas with Jerry Nelson and meet Phi-Scis from all around the country. That's the first time I met Paul Weinman, and he definitely made a big impression on me, talking about his career in the Middle East and in negotiating. And I took his book home and I read that thing from front to back. And I went and I tried to negotiate a used car for my stepfather not long after. I did not do a good job, but it made a big impact on me. Throughout college, I had several friends from the Middle East who were studying at Valpo that I really got to know how they think and what their life experiences are, not just on a superficial level, but some really good friendships. So for me, Paul was interesting because he lived in Lebanon, he grew up in Iran, and I was interested in having a career, maybe kind of like his. So I became aware that Paul Weinman, just by pure luck, was putting together this scholarship to attend the American University of Beirut in Lebanon. Luckily I knew some people at Phi-Sci who pointed out that this thing was going to be available the same year that I was graduating. And I put it out there. I wasn't sure if my resume was strong enough to get it or not, but I applied. I had never been to the Middle East prior to moving to Lebanon to start my studies. I think my flight actually arrived at 1 a.m. or something in Beirut. I had to, fetch a cab by myself. We pull in right next to the campus, call prayers going on in the background. Like there's Arabic graffiti everywhere, which is totally normal in an Arabic country, but when you haven't been there anywhere, before, in the backdrop, I think, to this context is you've got the war in Iraq that has just started. It's kind of a tense time in the region, right? And if you don't know a lot about the region, it can also be a really scary time to just kind of show up. So yeah, being kind of like this Midwestern guy without those types of experiences, like it was a little intimidating at first. Paul Weinman also made it a requirement that you had to live in a dorm with an Arab roommate. And thankfully, I had a roommate from Syria who was very helpful, like helping me to learn Arabic. I mean, he was happy to speak Arabic with me all the time. Without that, it would have been really difficult to learn. I think that living in the Middle East for 2 years, I didn't even come home for 2 years. I didn't come home for Christmas or for the summer or anything. I stayed there the whole time. You kind of become a part of that environment in a way. You get to know people's narratives. Living in the United States, in Indiana, we have a narrative about who we are, about how the world works. And sometimes we read about other people's narratives and maybe we even empathize with those narratives. It's different when you live those narratives. And a lot of those things about understanding how the developing world works are, in a way, pieces of knowledge that I was able to take to my career. So I think the first 5 or 6 months I was back were pretty challenging, but some of that stuff started to pay off. in 5 or 6 months, some of the things I did in the Middle East. And I had the opportunity through a friend I met in Syria to join this program called the U.S. Army Human Terrain System. The program, the idea was to embed different types of people with military units deployed in Afghanistan and Iraq. Different types of people as in a lot of different backgrounds that could advise local unit commanders on the population that they were working with. But eventually we would all embed with a unit in Iraq or Afghanistan, almost like any other shop within a battalion or brigade setting, just like the intelligence shop or the operations shop or whatever, you had the human train team. So we were active in meetings, we were active in the field. I actually did 2 deployments with the human train system. The first one was in Mosul, Iraq, which at that time in 2008 was about the hottest place in Iraq. A lot of insurgent groups had moved up from Anbar, where they had kind of been flushed out by tribes there and by Marines. It also is one of the most fascinating places in Iraq or the Middle East, honestly, because there's so many different types of groups there that especially made being part of the human train system especially relevant. I think May 2011 is when I left. I started looking for jobs again with the government. Those things take a long time. I was able to find first job I applied for in the private sector with Gallup, having provided, the U.S. military with, information and context about the local population, and having met so many people from throughout the region in my time in Beirut, it felt like a great fit for me to be able to continue that type of research. The fellowship has changed my life, immensely. I can draw a direct line from this scholarship to the work I did in Iraq with the military, to my work at Gallup, to some of the projects I get to contribute to now, some of the hopefully world-changing research Gallup does today. It's important to give back to the fraternity if you feel that the fraternity gave something to you. I think it's only right to give something back. In my case, the fraternity gave me the opportunity of a lifetime. It paid for my graduate school at a time when I would have never had the chance to do something like that or pursue the career I had. And maybe not everyone's going to get that exact same opportunity I had, but everyone had the opportunity to learn and grow and build that brotherhood and those bonds in their fraternities. And that's something that's extremely formative, I think. And it's one of the foundations for the rest of your life, in a way. And I think anytime you have an experience that was so positive for you, you shouldn't forget it. You shouldn't forget that someone paved that way for you, and it's important for you to try to pave that way for someone else.